Hello, so in this video I'm going to show you how to create a treasure chest. So we're going to make a low polygon model in Maya, and that's going to take about 2 videos. I'm going to be maybe a little less than 20 minutes. Here's a few things that you need to know. I'll call this one an intermediate video for Maya. So let's go ahead and get started. Go to create Polygon primitives, and I'm going to make sure interactive creation is disabled. Click on the options box for cylinder. Let's go ahead and leave the axis divisions to 20 and create. My object is really tiny, so I'm going to select it, R to scale. I'm going to scale that. I'm going to press 5 so I can see the shaded mode. I'm going to rotate that with E, and I'm going to rotate mine on the Z axis to a 90-degree angle. We have that. So now I'm going to hold down right click and select face mode. I'm going to select the bottom part. I'm going to delete it. So now we have half, and we have to go into object mode. I'm going to scale this a bit. Keep in mind, I'm not really using an image, I'm just kind of making this up as I go. So just try to make it as I'm doing it here. So double click on the move tool. I'm just going to change something here. So I'm going to change my marquee selection to drag selection. This is just a preference. So now I'm going to edit mesh, insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to click on the edge here. Going to press Q to exit, and I'm going to the channel box. I'm going to set this to 0.5 so that I have it in the middle. I'm going to select that same edge loop. I'm going to edit mesh, and then bevel options box. I'm going to type maybe 0.5. That's a little too much. I'm going to undo, and I'm going to set it to 0.1, and that is a lot better. I think I'll leave it this way. So now I'm going back and I'll insert an edge loop. I'm going to edit mesh, insert edge loop. I'm going to click here. I'm going to Q to exit, and I'm going to the channel box and set this to 0.2. And I'm going to insert another edge loop on the other side. Do the same thing. I'm going to press Q to exit, and I'm going to set this to 0.8. I'm just going to make sure that it looks the way I wanted it to look. Yeah, that's correct. So I'll go into face mode and select a few faces here for both sides. I'm going to edit mesh, extrude. I'm going to click on the square and scale that using the extrude manipulators. And I think that's fine. I'm going to press Q to exit. I'm going to insert an edge loop. Set this to 0.5. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. So I'm just going to press G so that I can use the insert edge loop. Press Q, and now I'm going to the channel box and type 0.5. So I'm going to object mode, and I'm going to extrude. I'll scale that. I'm going to press R to scale instead of using the extrude manipulator. So I just press R to scale, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to move this one down so that the faces on the bottom are completely flat. Go back into object mode. It looks like we have the top part. Now I'm going to select the faces here. I'm just going to scale that so that they are flat. So far so good. So now I'm going to select the bottom faces. I click one face and double click the face next to it. And I'm going to edit mesh, extrude. And I'm just going to press W to move that down. I'm going to scale that with R. Remember, R is to scale. I'm going to press G and I'm going to do another extrusion, and I'm going to move that down. I'm going to enter an edge loop. Just one for the top here. I'll undo, let's try that again, and that looks fine in my opinion. You'll see in a second why we need these edge loops. Let me scale that. And sometimes if you see you're in object mode and some faces are selected, just select them again and deselect them. Just a bug in Maya. Let me move some of these faces down. So now I'm going to select these two faces here, and I'm going to edit mesh, extrude. I'm going to use the extrude manipulator here, and I'm going to scale that. I'm going to press Q to undo, to exit. I'm going to do the same thing with this side. I just pressed G to do another extrusion. I'm going to select the top edges here and these two, and I'm going to edit mesh, delete edge vertex. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Select those edges. I'm going to press G. Now I'm going to select these two faces, but if I scale them this way, it's actually affecting the form, the silhouette of what I have here. So I'm going to double click on the scale tool. I'm going to change to average normals, so that way the manipulator, it's actually oriented the way I want it. So I'm going to scale that. That way I'm not really changing the shape, the silhouette of what I have. I'll do that with the other side as well. Once I'm done, I'm going to make sure I go back to World, my scale tool. So now I'm going to select this edge loop, including the side and the back as well. Make sure you have the whole edge loop. Let me hide the grid here for a minute so that it's not bothering our view. So now you can see that I'm selecting the whole edge loop that goes all the way around. So now I'm going to edit mesh, detach component. Detach component is right there. Now I'm going to select these faces. Make sure I select these two as well. And I'm going to edit mesh. I'll make sure I haven't selected faces that I didn't want to select first. And now I go to edit mesh, extrude, and use the blue handle. I'm going to move that in. Make sure it's not too much because we have some geometry that's in the interior of this of the model. So just enough. And our chest is starting to come to life. I go to mesh, separate, and because we detached the edges, now we have two separate objects. So if I move this one, actually I'm going to change the pivot for it. So I'm going to hold down insert and hold down V and just move it so that it snaps to the end of our chest. Just hold down V. You have to press insert once on your keyboard and then hold down V and just move it so that it snaps. Now if I rotate this, I can see that it's a separate object and we have something in the inside. So I forgot to separate that, which we're going to do in a few seconds here, just to make sure. So I'm going to undo and select this object, and I'm going to select the edges for the inside so that it's not connected to the bottom part. So make sure you select the whole edge loop and go to edit mesh, detach component. Now if we select the object, we can go to mesh and separate. We're going to select those two pieces and because they're not combined, we're going to mesh and combine them so that we have one piece. So I'm going to press insert, hold down V and just move it back so that it snaps into place. And if we rotate it, we can open our chest. We can see that we have two pieces, the top part and the bottom part. And we have holes at the moment, and we're going to fix that in a few moments. So now I'm going to select an edge here and go to edit mesh, append to polygon tool. So what we're going to do, click on one edge and click on the edge opposite to it. I'm going to press Y so that if I press Y, you see that you can continue to use the tool. So click one edge and click the edge that's opposite, the opposite side, so that you can fill the hole. If sometimes that happens, you can undo and make sure you click in the middle of the edge. Sometimes you'll encounter problems like that, so make sure you click on the edges. one side and the opposite side, so that you can connect the two edges and you can fill the hole. So that's what I'm doing, and then we're going to continue and do that for the top part here. So there's going to be two videos where I'm going to show you how to model it, which is this one, and then there's going to be a part 2, and we're going to be done with the whole modeling process. Once we're done, if all you wanted to learn was to model, then you're good to go. But if you want to learn how to do the UVs, how to UV unwrap the model so that we can actually texture it, you can stick around for another possibly two more videos, two videos for UV unwrapping. They're going to be maybe 15 minutes each, and then there's going to be maybe one video for texturing and a final one for lighting. So I'm looking at the bottom part here, and I'm going to delete a few edges that I don't think are doing anything. So you select those two edge loops, go to edit mesh, delete edge vertex. The reason I'm deleting those is because they're not really being useful. And because this is going to be a really low polygon chest here. So I wanted to keep it low poly. Of course, if you were going to high resolution, I'm going to delete these faces. If you're going to higher resolution, you can obviously you still have to care about having edges that are not doing anything. So I'm seeing here that we have some edges that we don't need. So I'm going to select one edge here and the top edge, and I'm going to edit mesh collapse so that I can get rid of those edges. Since this is a low polygon, I just wanted to keep it low poly and not be wasting anything. Just those edges and press G. And if I try this one, I don't think this one's going to work. No, don't do that. For that one, we might use something else. In fact, we're going to use the merge vertex tool. So get edit mesh and look for the merge vertex tool. So hold down and click on one edge and drag so that you can merge it to the other edge. If you're having problems with the merge vertex tool, you can always exit the tool and try again. That is something that happens very often in Maya. The merge vertex tool tends to, sometimes it can be difficult to select the vertex. So we're trying to get this to be really low poly. Last time we left off, we were using the merge vertex tool to merge some of the vertices so that we can have a lower poly model. Let me isolate select the bottom part. I'm going to select one edge and this other edge, and I'm going to use edit mesh, and I'm going to use collapse, and I'm going to do the same with this side. And I'm going to use the merge vertex tool one more time, just so I can merge this vertex to that vertex. The only reason I'm doing this is just so I can reduce the poly count for this particular object. You don't have to do that if this is not a low polygon object. So this will be something more in the realm of the video game where you want it to be low polygon. So in this case, using triangles is fine for a hard surface object. Let's go to edit mesh. I'm going to use the append to polygon tool and to click this side and this other edge. If something like this happens, just press enter and undo. And try it one more time. Make sure you click on the center of the edge, like this. I'm going to press Y, just so that I can continue to use the same tool. And there we have it. We close that hole. And we're going to do the same thing with the bottom, using the append to polygon tool. I'm going to press enter once I'm done. I'm just trying to look if there's other ways where I can reduce the edge count. So I can reduce the poly count. I'm going to edit mesh, merge vertex tool, and I'm going to... Sometimes it gets a little difficult to select the vertices. So you got to get closer to them. I'm going to use the merge vertex tool. I'm going to connect that edge to the corner. I'm going to do the same thing with this other one. And in this case, having those triangles there is not a problem because this is a non-deforming object. And I have a few edges here that I don't really need. I'm going to get rid of them. So I'm going to edit mesh, delete edge vertex. Let me get the other part back so that we can see that we are technically almost done with the first part. I'll just type 0 on the rotations just so I can get this back into place. And I can see that this one has more geometry than really needs to. I can absolutely reduce the number of poly count, the poly count number on this object, by deleting a few edges and making a few other connections. So I'm going to edit mesh, delete edge vertex. I'm going to delete this one as well, and this one. Now we have a huge end gun that we're going to fix in a few seconds by going into vertex mode, and I'm going to connect some of the vertices. And I'm having problems here selecting the other vertex, which can sometimes be a problem. Just try to zoom in. So go to connect components. I'm going to connect the components. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other remaining vertices. I'm just pressing G. Sometimes it can be really difficult to select one of the vertex. There we have it. I actually reduced the poly count on this side. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. Again, the only reason I'm going through this is because I want this to be a low polygon model. If this would be a film model, of course you would probably bevel the edges and make sure that it looks nicer than this. But we're going for a more low, maybe a video game model here. And this might even be too high for a game. It depends on what kind of game you're making. So there we have it. And I have an extra edge here that I'm going to delete. I'm going to edit mesh and delete edge vertex. So I have reduced the number of poly count my polygon for the top part, and I think I'm going to do the same thing for the inner part of the same model. So I'm going to select these edges. I'm going to select all these edges from the inner part. And I'll go to Edit Mesh, delete Edge Vertex. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. We don't need all these edges, especially for the inner part, which is not going to be too visible. So we don't need it to be too complex in terms of the edge loops that we have in the inner part. And more importantly, because this is going to be more of a video game model, so we want it to be low polygon, especially in the areas that we're not really going to see too much. We're going to select a few more edges that I want to get rid of. I'm going to get rid of those edges, just so that it's less complex. I'm probably going to get rid of this edge, but I think I'm going to connect going to fill the hole for the bottom part first. Let's go ahead and connect these vertices. Connect components for those two. What I did that I was isolated the faces of the bottom part, of the inner part, just so that it could be easier for me to see to select those vertices. So now that we have, I think I'm happy with what I have here. So I'm going to edit mesh, and I'm going to use that append to polygon tool just so that I can fill the whole of the bottom parts. And again, if you get something like this, which is not really what I wanted in this case, I'm just going to undo. It looks that I have an extra vertex there, so I deleted it. So now I'm going to edit mesh, append to polygon tool, and this time it should work fine. And I'm just pressing Y so that I can continue to use the tool. So we are almost done with the modeling process, and then later we're going to check if we have maybe n-gons that we might need to fix. And so now I want to get rid of the middle edge that's in the inner part. I'm going to select the edges in the middle. And I'll go to Edit Mesh, Collapse. It looks like I forgot one of the edges. Let me undo and select it again. go to collapse, and there we have it. And I think I may delete this edge. Might do the same with the other one. I'm going to deselect the ones in the top, and I'm going to delete them. So I'm going to edit mesh, delete edge vertex, and now I'm just going to connect those two by using the merge vertex tool. And everything looks fine for our top part. And I might leave it this way, or you can certainly keep that edge that was there in the middle. I just noticed that this part should have been higher than what I have it here, so I'm just going to connect those two. So there we have it. And one thing I'm going to do is going to go to the edit and delete history, delete by type history. I'm going to select this face and I'm going to extrude it. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. I noticed that we have an angle here, so I'm going to connect these two using the connect components. So I'm going to connect these two vertices. I'll scale that down. Now reduce the poly count for this thing, for this object. To something that's really low. Might even want it to be lower than that. I'm using the middle mouse button here when I clicked on the word that says radius. I'm just going to get that closer to my treasure chest here. These are going to be our handles. Let me go back here and use the middle mouse button. So I'm going to rotate it maybe 90 degrees on the Z-axis. And I'm just going to move the handles closer to the treasure chest. We rotate it a bit. And also like this, the faces for the side. I'm going to scale that just to give it more of the shape of a handle. I'm just going to extrude that using Edit Mesh Extrude. And I'll use the blue handle for that. And finally, I think I'm going to reduce the poly count for this one so that it's less dense. So I'm going to select some of the edge loops and I'm going to delete them. For a small object like this, since it's not going to be too visible, it's better to have it for it to be less dense. I'm going to delete my history by going to edit, delete by type history. I'm just going to selecting all the objects so that I can see what's going on here. And I forgot to delete one of the edge loops here. And so I'm going to delete that. And to get this handle to the other side, we're just going to duplicate that. So I just want to check I still have my rotations for the top part. And as I said, to get this handle to the other side, I'm going to press Ctrl D, and I'm just going to duplicate it and place it on the other side as well. And there we have it. I think we are probably done with the modeling for now. Although we might want to check in a few seconds how to make sure that we don't have any end guns left. And to do that, we go to Mesh, Clean Up, and make sure that you set it to select matching polygons and faces with more than 4. And we apply that to our object, and as we can see, we do have some end guns that we need to fix. So I'm going to connect those two. We connect components. Same with this one. And the same with the other side. So now we're pretty much done, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to UV unwrap the model. So first thing we do is we're going to select the object, and I'm going to assign a new material. I'm going to set that to a Lambert, and the attribute editor will open. And I'm going to click on the checker box, make sure it's a file, and we're going to click on the little folder here and find our UV image, which I'm going to provide in my website. And go ahead and get it. And I'm going to click here or press 6 just so I can see the texture on it. I'm going to select my other object and I'm going to assign existing material. In this case, it's going to be to my Lambert 2. So now we can see our distortion grid. I'm going to go ahead and go to Window, UV Texture Editor. So we can click here to make this easier on the eyes. And I'll click on this one as well, just so it's easier to see our UV shapes. So now it's time to UV unwrap. So basically I'm going to select the whole top part. I'm going to select all the faces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a cylindrical mapping, since the top face, the top part of the treasure chest has already a cylindrical kind of shape. That is why we're going to use a cylindrical mapping for it. So once you have selected all the faces, just for the top part, not the sides, just the top, we're going to go to, first I'm going to enable my texture so I can see it. I'm going to create UVs, and I'm going to just click on cylindrical mapping. And the important thing to do here is we have to change our rotations. So what I want to do is click on the little T. You'll see a T there, and just click on it. And then I'm going to click on the rotations for it. And if you lose it for some reason, I'll just undo and go ahead and do that again. Make sure you click on the T. And then it's going to, our manipulators are going to appear, and you can click on the one for rotation. And if you get far away, it's sometimes easier to select. So I'm going to rotate it, and I'm just going to rotate it on a 90-degree angle. And I'm going to check how it looks on my UV editor. So as you can see, I have two pieces. What I want I want it to be one piece, so I'm just going to rotate it, but this time the other way around, just until I have one piece. And there we have it. Just make sure you have one piece instead of two or more. So I'm just going to move that to the side. And you can just go into object mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little icon here. I'm going to click on my UV, and I'm going to press R to scale. And I'm going to scale it the other way, because what we want is we want to make sure that in the viewport that our texture looks more like squares. We want to make sure that the squares we have here, they look closer to squares rather than two stretched out triangles. We want to make sure they look as close as possible to squares. And you won't be able to get them looking to squares in every single angle, but you can always just move some of the edges. In this case, I'm going to select some of the faces here. I'm going to hold down Control and right click, and I get this little menu here. I'm going to go into UV mode. I'm going to press R to scale that down. The reason I'm doing that is because we were having some overlapped edges or UVs in our UV editor. And I just want to move this one just to, maybe I can make this to look more like squares for that part. We want the texture to look more like squares, and sometimes you can do it that way, just selecting one edge and going into UV mode and just moving that edge until you see that it looks more or less more like a square. And that means that there's going to be less distortion for our texture in that area. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. I'm going to do the same thing with the other part, and I'm going to hold down Control and right click and choose UV, and I'm going to scale that with R. We're pretty much going to do the same thing we did with the other one. Just trying to make that the little squares look like squares, so they are not too stretched or too compressed. So I think this one's, I think it looks fine, although you could obviously refine it more so that it looks better in terms of getting the squares to look like squares. I'm going to select this edge, and actually it should be the other one. Select that edge. I'm going to Control right click, go into UV mode, and move that one out, just so that I don't have any overlapping here that I didn't plan to. I'm going to go into UV and deselect using Control. Sometimes when you select the border of the UV, some of the UVs are going to be selected which belong to the same border, so you want to make sure you deselect them. So I think we're going to leave the top part as it is. I'm going to select the sides now, so that we can do the sides. I'm going to grow the selection here, so that we only have the side view. I'm going to create, and this time we're going to click on the planar mapping. Make sure you click on the options box and set it to best plane. Keep image width and height ratio as well. And we have it there. And we actually don't need to mess around with this one. We're just going to leave it as is for now, and just move the UV to the side so that we can manipulate it better. And then click to enable that so that I can select, and I'm going to rotate it, scale that down just so I can see the squares a little better. And then they actually look fine, although I've noticed that they are flipped, so I'm going to click here just so that they are actually the right way. I'm going to select those faces, and I'm going to hold down Control, right click, and scale that down. Sorry if I'm going a little too fast, but just trying to keep the lesson in the time constraint that it's not too long of a lesson. I'm going to select that edge and that edge, and I'm going to polygons and cut UV edges. I'll just go into UV mode. And we're going to move that one down, and there's actually going to be some overlapping, but in this case that is absolutely fine, just so that I can have less distortion on that area. And in this case it's fine because we're actually not even going to use a normal map. We're just going to paint this model. So that looks fine. And we're going to do absolutely the same thing with the other side. So if you missed something, you're going to get to see it once again for this side. We're going to use the planar mapping. Open the UV editor and just move that to the side. And I'm going to select these edges. And in the UV editor, I'm going to go to Polygons, Cut UV Edges. And to deselect, you just hold down Control to deselect something. I'm going to move that down, and as we can see, we don't have distortion in that area anymore. So that looks absolutely fine. Let me select this area so that we can do the inner part. And we're going to select the edges for the inner part, and we're going to apply a cylindrical mapping just as we did with the top part. Go ahead and select the faces here. And we're going to create cylindrical mapping, and make sure you click on the little T. You see a T here, and I'm going to click on the rotation. Just rotate it about 90 degrees. And now I'm just going to make sure that I have one piece. So I'm going to rotate it the other way until I get one piece. And just move this one to the side just so that we can work with it. I'm going to scale that down just so that I can see that better in the viewport, and scale that just so that we can get, again, making sure that the texture, we can get the squares, that they look like squares, and that there's not too much stretching going on. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it this way, especially since it's the inner part. So I'm going to select the side view, and that's going to be really easy. I'm going to apply a planar mapping. And in this case, we don't even have to do anything with this one. We're just going to leave it as is. And we're going to do the same thing with the other side. We'll create planar mapping. Again, we're just going to leave it this way. I'm just going to move it to the side. And now all we have left is do the bottom part, the bottom faces. I'm going to select this face and do a planar mapping. Open the UV editor and move it to the side. I'm just going to scale it down for now. And since this part belongs to this side, I'm just going to put it here. select this face, planar mapping, and I'm just going to move that to the side. I want to rotate it. And of course we're going to select the other remaining faces and apply a planar mapping. And finally, we're just going to do some of the remaining faces. So we continue where we left off last time. We're UV unwrapping the top part. And this time, one more thing I'm going to do, I'm going to select these edges. I'm going to open the UV editor, and I'm going to cut UV edges. So now if we select that face, go into UV mode, I'm going to go into shell, and I'm going to scale that. So now what you can see, we have two separate parts, and the reason I'm doing that is because that's going to make it a lot more easier for us to texture this later. It would be easier to have separate parts so that we can texture this later. And I think I'm going to do the same thing for the side so that we can have separate parts. The main reason is because I'm going to use a wood texture. So we just want to make sure that it makes it a lot easier for us to texture that. And I'm going to polygons, cut UV edges. I'm going to select that face, Control and right click. Go to shell and scale that down. Actually, we can just move that down a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. This is not required, but you can certainly do it just to make the texturing process easier for yourself. So I noticed that I have an extra part here, so I probably forgot to do the UVs for that area. As I can see, it's that bottom part, so I'm going to select those faces. And I'm just going to apply a planar mapping. And there we have it. So at this point, it looks like we are actually done with the top part. So I'm going to select everything and I'm going to layout and click on the options box. Make sure you set the settings this way. And I'm going to pack everything. So now you can see that our pixel density for the whole object looks about the same. And I'm going to delete history for that object. So now we're going to work on the bottom part, and this one's going to be a lot easier. It's mainly going to be some planar mapping. So as we can see, it looks horribly the way it is right now. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's go into face mode and select, go to grow the selection. And make sure to have the whole side selected. And we're going to apply a planar mapping. Open the UV editor. And let's go ahead and do the other areas as well, just to make this easier on us. Apply a planar mapping, just move that to the side. And let's go ahead and continue and do the remaining planar mapping. And let's go ahead and do that with the remaining side. A planar mapping and move that to the side. I'm going to do the bottom part as well. And this is a really straightforward process where you can see we're doing absolutely the same thing with all the sides. We're going to be applying planar mappings to them. And after this video, I will have another video which will show you how to texture it. And there will be a final video which will be about lighting. And I'm going to select some of the edges here. Let's go ahead and do that for the other side as well. Let's do that for all the sides, just to make it easier on us. And I'm going to cut UVs for that particular side. I'm going to cut the UVs for those edges, just so that we can have those faces as separate, just to make it easier for the texture process. So let's go ahead and go to polygons and cut UV edges. I'll select that face. And I'm going to UV mode and just scale that down. And I'll do the same with the other face as well. And I'm going to select the same edges, go to UV mode. This time I'm going to unselect some of the inner faces for that face by holding down Control, and I'm going to scale this down just because I knew I had some overlapping there. And we're going to do the same thing with the other one, and eventually with everything else as well. And I'm going to pack everything by going and using that layout. And I probably should have done that before I decided to cut everything, just so that we can have everything packed better. But since I already did that, I'll just work with what I have here. And I'm going to continue and select a few edges here. Going to UV mode, I'm going to deselect this area, and I'm going to scale this area down. Again, the reason I'm doing this is because I was having some overlapping that I didn't really want to have, because it's creating some distortion in my UV grid. There's going to be some distortion in the texture unless I fix this. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. And I believe that was the last one that we needed to do. And I just noticed that I have a face here that I forgot to UV, it looks like. We can tell because there's a lot of distortion on it. So I'm just going to select it and do a planar mapping. And obviously I have to scale that down. And for last thing we're going to do is we're going to UV unwrap this little guy. And it's going to be relatively easy. We're going to select that edge face loop and we're going to apply a planar mapping like this. And we're going to do the same thing with the other side. And finally the remaining faces. And for these faces we're going to use a cylindrical mapping. I'm going to click on the T, click here and rotate it about 90 degrees. And I'm going to do the last area, a cylindrical mapping. I'm going to click on the little T here and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And we should be good to go. Let's check it out. Let's actually enable the texture here so we can see it. So apply a Lambert, actually the existing material that we already had, and I can see that we have some overlapping. I'm going to click here and I'm going to use the unfold for this one. I'm going to click here, the object, and click here, and I'm going to drag where it says unfold, just so that I can fix that overlapping issue. And for this face, I'm not going to use unfold, I'm just going to select the UVs and I'm going to move those. Okay, and finally I'm going to select everything and I'm going to apply a layout just so everything is in one place. And in the end I'm just going to group everything so that the UVs for this object are included with our treasure chest. I'm going to scale this down and I'm going to include them. And I'm only going to UV one side of the handles, because you can always duplicate this handle and it's going to keep the UVs. The UVs are going to be overlapping in that case. And we're coming to a close in this video, and in the next video we're going to show you how to actually texture the model using Adobe Photoshop. So in the next video I'm going to show you how to texture it, and there's going to be a last video which is going to be how to do some basic lighting. Model and UV unwrapped. So this is what we have. This is a treasure chest, and let's go to the UV texture editor. And we can see our UVs here. I'm going to polygons, UV snapshot. And I'm going to browse for a place where I can save my file. I'm going to set this to a 2048 for now. I'm going to keep these. I'm going to make it a Maya IFF file. I'm going to say OK. And that saved our file. So we go to Photoshop, I'm going to file open, and we're going ahead and look for our file. It will look like this. So I'm going to create a new layer, let's name our layers first. It's going to be my background, and I'm going to move that down. I'm going to image, it's edit, fill. And I'm going to choose my foreground color, and I'm going to say OK. Just make sure that your colors are set to black and white. I'm going to lock the transparency for this layer. For the actual UV layer that has our UV. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to edit, fill. This time I'm going to change that to my background color, which in this case is white. And it fills our UV space here. You should have something that looks similar to this. So I'm going to place my image, and you can get this image from my website, which is a wood image. I'm going to move. I'm actually going to press Ctrl J so that I can duplicate this layer. And I'm actually going to, I want to keep my original images, so I'm going to create a folder for my originals. And I'm going to place that original image in there, and I'm just going to disable the visibility so that I don't work on that one for now. So if I hold down, let's move this one, and I'm going to hold down Alt and left mouse click, you can see that I can duplicate this layer. I'm just going to move that to the side, and you can hold down Shift if you want it to be in the side, if you want it to stay in the side. And I'm going to select both layers, and I'm going to merge layers. I think I'm going to do another duplicate. I'm going to move that down. And I'm going to merge the layers. Now I'm going to click on my UV layer, and I'm going to select this tool right here, and I'm going to click outside here just so that I select this area. I'm going to enable my wood texture. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to delete just so I can get something like this. And I'm going to use the marquee select and just delete everything else. And this is actually the whole process. This is everything that we're going to do. We're going to continue to that with our wood texture and the other areas of our model. And then we're going to bring some, maybe a metal texture. I'm actually just going to use 2 textures for this. Although you can always use more, you can always overlap some textures so that you can have more, so your texture can look more unique. So I'm going to save my file. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. That's no problem in this case. It's going to be my diffuse file. And now I'm going back to Maya. And I'm going to assign a new material. I'm going to choose a lumber in this case. And I'm going to choose a Photoshop file this time because this is a Photoshop file. And I'm going to go ahead and get my texture. And this is how it should be looking, where we can start to see our actual texture on our model. So this is actually going to be our process. We're going to go to Photoshop and texture, then we'll come back to Maya and see what everything looks like. So actually this time let me go get my wood texture back so I can work with it. I'm going to duplicate it, get it out of that group. I'm going to press Ctrl T to rotate it, as you saw there. And I'm going to click on my UV layer and use the same technique. I'm going to click outside on this time. Let me go ahead and enable my texture here. And if I try to delete, it gets me this message, which means I'm using a smart object, and I'm going to rasterize it. So now I can delete it. Again, the textures can be found on my website, or you can always go and create an account for CG Textures, which is an excellent website. They have plenty of textures there that you can use. So let's go back to Maya. Once you save your file, you're going to reload the image, as you can see here. We can see that our texture is coming along. And we're going to continue and use the same process for the whole object. So as I said, if you want to get a good selection of textures, you can go to cgtextures.com. They have really nice textures there. They have a good library that you can use. That's actually the website where I get my textures most of the time. Or you can get this for this particular tutorial. You can get these textures from my website. I have the 2 image files that we're going to use for in this case. And in this case I'm going to delete. Notice that I'm deleting the areas that I don't want. If you wanted to be more careful about making sure that you do this in a non-destructive way, you can always use masking. That way you can always have the texture there without losing anything. So in this case I'm actually deleting the texture. You can always use masking in order to preserve that texture. But in this case I'm just going to delete the areas that I don't really want. And this is pretty much the whole process that we're going to continue for this video, and we're going to use the same process over and over until we have the whole model textured. And in the next video I'm going to show you how to use how to do a quick lighting. It's going to be a quick lighting lesson. Make sure that the wood panels look around the same size. In this case mine look a little smaller for the side view, but I'm just gonna keep it for now. You can always make sure that they are, you can always finesse the look of the model. So now I got my other texture, which is my metal texture in this case. I'm going to make a duplicate and put that in my original images. And I'm going to duplicate this one. So I'm going to flip that image. I just want to make sure that there's not a huge seam there. It's not too noticeable that I have two textures next to each other. I'm just going to delete. Obviously you can probably do a better job than that. I'm just trying to do this little quick. We're going to do the same thing that we did with our wood texture. I'm just going to delete the areas I don't really want for now. So this is pretty much going to be the whole process. We're going to continue to do the same thing. So I'm going to leave you for now, and you can continue to see what the whole process is. I'm just going to continue, and it's going to be the same process for the whole video. So I'm going to leave you for now, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to do some easy quick lighting. So here we have our treasure chest that we textured the last time. I noticed something here. I'm going to select my edges. And I'm going to my normals. I'm going to soften the edges. I just noticed that the edges there look too hard. So I just want to make sure that they look a little softer than that. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a polygon primitive. I'm going to choose a plane, scale that up. I'm going to change the subdivisions. I just want to make sure that this is really simple. It's just going to be our ground plane. Going to snap that to our grid. Remember to snap something, just hold down the V while you move your model. So let's go ahead and create a directional light. I'm just going to scale that up. And for a directional light, it doesn't really matter where the light really is. It doesn't matter where the light is. It just matters the rotation is the thing that matters. So let's go ahead and open the attribute editor. And we're going to increase the intensity and change the color. So I'm going to duplicate it with Ctrl D, and I'm going to move that to the side. I'm just going to rotate it the other way, just so that I can have a fill light. I'm going to increase the intensity. I'm going to change the color, maybe to some blue kind of color. This is going to be our fill light. The other light is our key light. Let's click here so that we can render. So we can start to see what we have. I'm going to change Maya software to mental ray. I'm going to render. So I'm going to change my shadows something lighter than black. I'm going to enable my ray trace shadows. I'm going to change the light angle to about 2 and my shadow rays. And let's try that again so that this time we can see the shadows. I'm going to select this light and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move that back, and this is going to be our rim light. We just want to show off our model here, so I'm going to create that rim light. I'm going to change my color, and I'm going to increase the intensity to something really high. Let's go ahead and look what that looks like. So render it. We can just play around with our rotations until we get something that we're more happy with. For now, don't worry about the the plane in the ground. Don't worry about that. Just going to ignore that for now. Right now we're just looking at how the lighting looks for the treasure chest. So now let's check how that looks. I'm kind of happy with what it looks like. I'm going to click there for my camera controls. I'm going to click where it says environment, and I'm going to change my environment color to something like a blue kind of color. Okay, now let's select our plane, and we're going to assign a new material. And in this case I'm going to use the use background material, which is going to use our background color, which was that kind of blue that we just chose, to reduce the reflectivity and the shadow mask a bit. So now let's go ahead and look at the render. As you can see, we don't even have the plane anymore. The reason we needed the plane is just so that we can get a shadow of our model without really having to have a plane there. So this is pretty much what I'm going to do. I'm going to increase my shadow rates just so that I can have a better looking shadow. And one last thing, I'm going to look at my render settings. I'm going to increase my settings here. I'm going to set this to production. Just go ahead and close it. And I'm going to click here just so I can see what I'm going to render. And go ahead and just render it. And I'm pretty much happy with what I have here. So this has been our lighting tutorial, and thank you for following all the way. If you decided to follow the modeling, texturing, and UV, and also the lighting tutorial. So thank you for watching.